Welcome to the October 12th, 2021 Winchester Planning Board meeting. We have a quorum of members with us at the moment. We also have with us, why don't I go through and do a roll call vote on that quorum? So let's see, Sally Dale?
Present.
Eaching Scott?
Present.
Kurt Spring?
Present.
And Deab Jarius, present. We also have with us Town Planner Brian Zucchelli, Assistant Town Engineer Brian Manter, Nancy Polcari, our Recording Secretary. We are being recorded this evening, both by WinCam, thank you WinCam, and via Zoom. And if ever you need to get a hold of us for any reason, you can email us at planningboard@winchester.us. So to jump right into our first item, we're only 1 minute in arrears at the moment. So one of the things that we unfortunately did not do last time was to vote to continue our public hearings for 10 Converse Place to a time certain. And we need to do that this evening. And I believe our time certain is at, on the date will be October 26th. And our time certain, I believe, should be at 7:45. Or do we want to go to 7:30 and then have our updates and such things after the hearing? Amy? Okay, so why don't we move it to a time certain of 7:45. I think we need to, if someone could make a motion to continue the public hearing for 10 Converse Place to October 26, 2021 at 7:45.
I would so move.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. Kurt Spring?
Aye.
Eaching Scott?
Aye.
Sally Dale?
Aye.
Deab Jarius, aye, 4-0.
Deab, so Cheryl Wolf has actually been here for the vote, so
Cheryl.
to do that 5. I saw her coming in. I didn't want to interrupt there, but so we do need the 5. So and she was here for the vote.
Okay, Cheryl, can you just say that you're present?
I am present.
And would you like to vote on that motion, please?
Aye.
Okay, so we are 5-0 to continue it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we thank Kurt for breaking his vacation for a couple minutes to join us on the vote this evening. Have a great time, Kurt. See you next time.
Yep, thanks guys. Sorry to miss it tonight, but yeah, I'll be on the next one.
Okay, the next thing on our schedule is to, I'll just go through the schedule real quickly now that we have a little more time. So we're going to have, in a sense, a continuation of our conversation with the Conservation Commission. We're going to be talking about our joint interests and how we can move forward. Then we are going to be talking about consultants for a study of the Holton Street area, looking at what are the possibilities for that area. Then we will be talking about what the planning board will be presenting at town meeting in terms of our report to town meeting and things associated with the articles. We will then be speaking with a party who wishes to put a subdivision up on Rocky Ledge, which is land behind Mahoney's off of Cambridge Street. We had planned on doing a plan review this evening, but we forgot to indicate that it should be an executive session. So when we get to that point of the agenda, we may decide to just go for a longer term review of our planning board and setting new priorities for the next half year. So why don't we jump right into our Planning Board and Conservation Commission co-meeting. And I believe we have the CONCOM chair, Zeke Nims, with us, with a pal.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, guys. I'm going to try not to get in the way. We have both Reed Pugh and David Miller, who have got items that are worth more time than my words. So I'm going to first pass quickly to Reed. I know we have a short window of opportunity here. Reed, if you have comments first and maybe the direction, and then of course, David, I know you have some agenda items that we can discuss.
I have no agenda items, actually. I think this is entirely a Reed show with regard to the Aboriginal Initiative.
Okay, Reed, please. Yes.
Hey, thank you, Zeke. Thank you for having us here tonight. Planning Board, I've talked to a number of people. You may have seen in the packet the presentation we've been doing around town. You may have also seen our video that we did a few months ago. But I'm part of a small group, which includes Ann Storr and Elaine Vreeland, who's our administrator. We constitute the Aboriginal Initiative, which is a subgroup of the Conservation Commission. And it was formed in 2015. And really for the last 4 years, we've been spending our limited money that we have as a Conservation Commission to prove that we can have a significant impact, largely on Mill Pond. And the impact is, or at least the challenge that we're meeting, is that Mill, Judkins, and along the river are so overgrown and so overpopulated by some large invasive plants that we've actually lost a lot of the views and access to the river that anyone in this town should really enjoy. And so part of our process has been working with a professional company that's licensed to do this work on the riverbank to remove a lot of these invasives. But our longer term plan is to actually do some design work to bring in some new plants and new materials while maintaining the views and to minimize the ability of these invasive plants to grab hold again. And I don't want to, we had a presentation. I don't really want to spend much time going through the presentation as much to engage you guys in the conversation. Largely at the end of this, we're looking for your support. You know, as we go to the Chamber of Commerce, as we're going to our select board representatives, as we go to the Cultural District Committee, as we go to the Chamber of Commerce, I think I already said that. We're trying to basically build a coalition around this, understanding why this is so important. Obviously, from a Conservation Commission perspective, it's important because we want to create good habitat and good environment. From the Cultural District Committee, if many of you saw the recent fences exhibit that was all around town, very well received, a beautiful, beautiful exhibit. In many cases, it was along the waterfront, backed up by massive piles of our top 10 list of invasive materials, from bittersweet to buckthorn to knotweed. And if you think about the grassy area down across from the post office, you can't even see the river from there. And 80% of what's there is all invasive material, covering actually a small base of native plants. So our initiative, as we're doing now, is now we're seeking and going around town to seek funding for what will be sort of a multi-year project to design and replant along these areas. But really our work in the recent years has been to prove that we can have an impact. And if you haven't noticed the impact, I'll gladly meet any of you downtown, walk you around, talk to you about what we've been doing. And it really, you know, we've had a meeting with Brian, our group had a meeting with Brian not too long ago. We all realize how important Mill Pond is as the center of this town. The opportunities of what can be done there if we have access and a beautiful area to go to. You know, I've talked to Sally about some of the wonderful ideas that she has. I've talked to Brian Keeler on the traffic. He has an idea. A lot of people have ideas for how we could really work this. But the great challenge is this area is just inundated with plants that just don't behave well and don't provide the access. So I'd rather not continue to talk, but actually open it up and take questions from any of you about what we're trying to do, what our next steps are. And as I said, largely what we'd like to do is actually get your support that we can take with us as we go and talk to different groups and entities and you know, try and get this project done in the next year or two. Open it up. If anyone has questions or.
Planning board, jump right in. I think this is pretty much a free-for-all at this point. Let's try to keep enough time for everyone to go around and have their say. Go ahead, Sally.
So I have a question about the water level in the pond. It's not entirely related to the Aboriginal River Initiative, but I'm just curious about why the water level has been kept low?
That's something I want to follow up with. My understanding a while ago is it actually has to do, for some reason, I don't understand why the construction that's happening upstream, that they're managing the flow, but I don't know why that means that the gates couldn't be closed down there. I want to go to DPW. I want to find out more because the challenge is we're now having a lot of those plants going to seed, and I want to stop that. So that is something I'm planning on doing in short order here.
I had a downtown resident say to me that the pond smells because of the low water level, which I guess I don't have a very good sniffer. So fine. But the other question that I have is about once you remove these plants, do they come back, and is it within the operating budget of such an initiative to have ongoing, like a sustainable budget?
So that's the challenge that we're at. So if we break this up into two projects, there's the project we want to do, which is to do a little bit of design work, but mostly do the planting work, which is to essentially take out the invasives and put in native plants that will then outcompete invasives. That's one chunk. That's one number. That's a project. The other part is then the ongoing, and we need the town. We're trying to figure out where and who. We need the town to commit to an annual figure, whether it comes into our budget or wherever, to maintain this. And the challenge is, if anyone works in their garden, you know that it takes a little work up front. But once you take care of things, it's a little easier to take care of things in the back end. So there's the one project we were actually presented to the capital planning committee. They denied us. They didn't think it was the right thing for them. We're now looking at doing budgeting. I am not nuanced in the operations of town. We're working through this process to figure out where to get the first chunk, which is to do basically about $100,000 over 3 years to do this work. And then ongoing, we're looking at a $10,000 to $15,000 budget for ongoing care by a professional organization licensed to do the proper work. We do use some herbicides that are approved in this area. You might notice actually between the two bridges across from the post office in September, which is the prime time to tackle them, we just removed 3 large clumps of knotweed, which if we didn't do are going to overwhelm everything in our town. And that's a very specific process at a very specific time done by licensed. It's not just, we use the DPW. In fact, we're looking to have the DPW to work down there to remove some trees and large material. And they're a broadsword and they're a very valuable part of this process, but they're just not capable or licensed to do the finer expert work that's required.
Yeah, I think Brian Mancher has his hand up. Maybe he has something to say about water levels.
Yes, thank you, Dia. Reed, I work in the engineering department. I'm familiar with this bridge project at Swan Street, and you're correct. DPW does manage the water level in the Aboriginal and Mill Pond to aid in that project, and that's to allow water to flow through the construction zone, to keep the water level at that construction site as low as possible.
So if they were to close the gates at Centerfall Dam, it would back the water up enough to give them some challenges up there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It would back up the water and it would slow more slowly through their construction site.
Can I ask you a question? Is there a way that we can find a happy median? Is there a way that we can get the water up? Can we close the gates partially? Because all of those weeds that are in that bed right now, those are going to spread everywhere.
That's a question for DPW to answer.
Okay.
They manage that, but maybe that's possible, but it's all dependent on rain, the amount of rain we get. And, if it's been dry for a while, maybe they can raise the gates, but DPW can speak to that more.
Oh, yeah, we understand that process.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
I had a couple quick questions. One is, what will you have to do upstream to maintain? I mean, knotweed loves to flow along water. So cleaning up Mill Pond gets Mill Pond nice, but you're still going to have upstream sources for these invasives. So how are you going to, you may spend $100K to clean it up. And I'm glad that you're optimistic you can keep knotweed out with appropriate invasive or native plants, but
no, it's it's the bane of our existence. What we do flows downstream. What happens upstream affects us. Knotweed is easy to handle when you see it in its first year or even its second year. These clumps that we took, go take a look down on that grassy side where the picnic bench is across from the post office. We took out clumps that were probably 15 feet wide. Those are probably 8 to 10 years old, and that required a massive, massive event. To handle them when they're a year or two old and they're only a foot or two, by having someone pass through once or twice a year, is a very simple process. It hasn't
Okay.
established. It doesn't have, those roots on those large clumps are 3, 4, 5 feet deep. You break off the smallest little section, it's a new plant. So the management of anything is done best with early oversight. And the $100,000, and I want to clarify this, that part is more for planting and actually executing the design than really maintaining. It's not really a maintenance as much as it is removing some things and doing a lot of planting. The bulk of that money is going to go into planting.
Okay. Does anyone else from the planning board have a question? David Miller, you're not on the planning board. You can't ask a question. I Ching has a question. Go ahead, I Ching, please.
I love the initiative. I think that I'm also trying to do a native garden amongst a bunch of really manicured lawns of my subdivision. But I agree, it's a real investment up front, and then things if it becomes sort of an ecosystem, you see the native bees, you see the native, the birds, and those are so important to sort of all work together. I love it. I wanted to know, I think that in that whole ecosystem, there's the Mystic Watershed organization that sort of did the herring run, and it seemed like it was a real great step. And is there collaboration with groups like that to help with this?
I wouldn't say we're not working with them currently. This is sort of our space. I can't speak to the herring run. If Anne's on, I know she could talk further about that. But yes, it is. We're creating a healthier ecosystem. A lot of the plants that are there now, the non-natives, do berry, do fruit, do have seeds and all. Many of them are toxic and not good for the native. So a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I see bees in the bittersweet and the multiflora rose," but they're not healthy environments. But actually, if I can take your point a step further, so yes, we as a conservation commissioner are interested mostly in the habitat, but in talking with the Cultural District Committee and in talking with the Chamber of Commerce, what we are doing is we're not the end all. We're basically creating a foundation for the Cultural District Committee. We're creating a foundation for what the Chamber of Commerce and local business can do in this area, what we as a town could do. I mean, I don't want to, call out Brian, but I mean, we were talking the idea of having events around Mill Pond by making it accessible, viewable. If you can remember, just a couple of years ago, you couldn't see Mill Pond from Mystic Valley. You couldn't see it largely from areas on the lawn at the library. We're not going to address the area in front of Converse Place because we're waiting for them to come in front of us and curious to see what they might have for helping us to restore along that bank. But largely, we would hope that they're going to follow in what we're planning on doing. But this isn't just a habitat, it's as much for many, many other opportunities around town. And we're just building a foundation to make it a healthy and accessible place.
I know that, I'm sorry, one more thing. I know that Somerville passed a pretty radical zoning law. I think it's fairly new, but in town-owned spaces to begin planting natives and to sort of have this connection of habitats that start to become more, would that kind of a thing help with you guys? Or is that something that, the planning board can do? Push?
Well, I think when it comes to conservation spaces or areas that are sort of under our jurisdiction, we do have a lot of say in what gets done. I think outside of our jurisdiction, other areas, I was working with David Diab on a potential tree bylaw committee. I mean, there are all sorts of other ideas. And and I would like that. The challenge is, as someone, I'm professionally in the horticultural world, so I know the value. I know that many native plants can be beautiful and relatively orderly. Not everything has to look like a hot mess, like a lot of people think native plants look like. But I think there's great value to thinking along those lines. And native just simply means those that are better attuned to our habitat. Now, what's native here might end up being what's native in Maine in about 50 years if we keep going this way and with the environment, climate.
So unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time. I can't imagine that any member of this board would not be in support of your work. I won't speak for them. I guess the question comes in, how can we most effectively help you? I think I Ching's point about the Mystic River Watershed Association, which unfortunately has the MRWA logo, which is confusing with the MWRA. For a while, they put a little Y in there, so it was MYRWA. They are certainly a great organization, which has been doing amazing work over the last many decades, I think. So I guess the big kicker is the initial 100K that you would need. And then the maintenance, I think, is something that's a much smaller bill, obviously, which could come from, donations from the chamber, because they're certainly affected by the beauty of that area. But I don't know.
As I said in the beginning, I'm not here asking you for money as much as I am for your support that we can carry with us. We're trying to build essentially a coalition of people that we can carry with us. And I've talked to a lot of people off the record about this, as I see people around town. But we would love to have, whether it's officially voted support for our initiative or whatever it might be, something that we can carry with us as we'll get from the chamber and historical and cultural district and everyone else. Unless you have other suggestions too.
Well, all I'm going to say is I'm glad you didn't come here asking for money, because we have none to give you. But I think we could make a motion in support of this, if that would be, if that, Sally?
That was exactly what I was thinking, is that I would like to make a motion that the planning board issue a statement of resolute support for the work of the Aboriginal Initiative, and will put its support behind their requests for funding, pending our review of what it's about, and that we will support their principles in other projects around town as they emerge.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, great. We'll do a quick roll call vote here. Cheryl Wolf?
Aye.
Sally Dale?
Aye.
I Ching Scott?
Aye.
Dia Jurius, aye. You have our support. 4-0 with Kurt is no longer with us this evening. So thank you.
I think
Thank you very much for stopping by.
You have my email. Anyone can reach out to me. I'll gladly walk anyone around the water bodies of water, tell you further about what we're thinking. It would be my pleasure to do that if anyone wants.
Thank you,
Excellent.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So why don't we move on to the next thing in our agenda, which is
Holton Street study.
Holton Street studies. So the gist of this is that we approached town meeting in spring of this year for some money to perform a study of the Holton Street area, looking at possible development scenarios, essentially to do something similar to what we've seen done on North Main Street. So the Holton Street area is semi-industrial, I guess you'd call it. There's certainly a patch of industrial land right on the border with Woburn. There are pockets that are hidden behind the residential area. Yeah, Brian is outlining all of those areas. And also, I think it should also include, Brian, the section coming across the name of the street, Cross Street, right? Can you, yeah, right, there's a bit of a, okay, I'll wait until the world stops moving there. Coming across Cross Street, there's a little bit of an industrial park hidden right there.
Oh, on
So,
Lowell Avenue, right, Lowell Ave, right.
yeah. So this is something we've been talking about for a number of years, and you may recall Brian reached out to the current owners of the what's now labeled as the Tag Logistics Group, and they had indicated that they were interested in maintaining its current usage at some level. But Brian, you want to say a little bit more of your conversation with them?
They basically just said that they had a number of long-term leases that they're going to maintain, and that is their business, is doing these long-term maintenance leases. So they obviously were interested in whatever it is we're doing in the area, but that was it. The idea, for those who, I guess, were not familiar with the offshoot of the Triangle Master Plan, which was basically an area to look at an area that was a little bit larger than this kind of semi-industrial zone. But the brainstorming ideas that started out with, in terms of the potential areas for development, not necessarily residential, but just development in general, the three areas that came out of the master plan and several of their studies were the downtown, North Main Street, the GBD 2 and 3, which is what we're currently going through, I guess, a phase 1 study with MAPC right now. And then this is the third area, the Holton Street area, and it's the question of what to do here. And that's kind of, we don't necessarily want to know. We don't know exactly what we want to do here, other than that there is potential, whether it's for something that's more commercial and with residential kind of subservient to it, or potentially something else. The idea is that this area does not have a recent study on it, and we need to do kind of some similar studies that we were doing with North Main Street, maybe in a different way. But the idea is visioning studies to kind of determine what the town wants to see this area to be. A large part of town is very interested in expanding the amount of commercial space for the few commercial spaces that we have. So one idea was some type of high technology in this area. But again, there's no reason, we're not trying to focus then say we're only going to do a high technology area or medical or expanded medical area. So it's really kind of a blank slate. I think it's at some level based upon the amount. There definitely are some very strong, thriving businesses already here. So it's not, this is basically to, augment the area, not necessarily for the businesses that I like. And like I said, there are a number of thriving businesses here, businesses that are doing very well. So the idea is the space is just kind of used differently here than in other parts of town, and it's a question of whether we can use that space differently. So Diab, I didn't know how you wanted to kind of guide the conversation on what to do. Options of studying this are putting out an RFP, which is a normal or typical, I wouldn't say normal, a typical way to find a consultant that you want to look for. There also are a number of state approved consultants such as MAPC, which is who we used previously in terms of, so we don't have to go through a procurement process for MAPC specifically. That was part of the reason. I think we definitely lucked out in general with having Josh Fiala. I cannot guarantee if we were to use MAPC again, in general, that we would get him. Although I would probably would not mind that. it's really, I guess I'll give it back to you, Diab, in terms of where we want to go here. But it's really, I guess, the one question is, how do we want to find the consultant? I guess that's one major question that we should.
Well,
we can, you know.
before we get to how do we want to find the consultant, we have to talk about how much we can spend on the consultants. And so we were given $15,000 by town meeting specifically for studying this area. It turns out that we actually have funds left over from the master plan. I don't recall the exact amount. I think it was was it 15 or 18, Brian?
I'm looking now. I think it was closer to 12, but I will look.
12. And we would, from looking at what the language in the article that came before town meeting to give us those funds, we should be able to use them as part of the study area, because this is I think it's called an area of opportunity. And so it would be certainly in line with that. So that gives us a little more money. And one of the benefits of going with, say, MAPC is they do provide matching funds. So the North Main Street study, Brian, I think, was that 25K?
No, I believe that was 20 on our, it was 20 of our money.
20 of our money, and then they chipped in some amount.
They chipped in at the end. It's going to be a little more than 10,000 that they put on top of it.
Okay, so but the idea would be that level, that the amount of effort that goes into the North Main Street will cost around 30K. North Main Street, I don't know if it's less, I don't know if it's more complicated than Holton Street in the sense there, but it just, it gives you an idea of what we would get for 30K. So if we have maybe, we have 15K plus maybe if we have 12 from the leftover of the master plan and then something kicked in, we would probably have around 30K-ish.
Maybe even more, because I think if we have 15 plus the 12, that's 27. So call that 30, and then MAPC could make that 30, 40 based upon what we just did, basically putting in about $10,000 worth of technical assistance work. We also could apply for more through the local. This is what Josh was talking about at the end. It's called DLTA, the District Local Technical Assistance Grants, which are rolling grants for exactly this, technical assistance grants to kind of do planning consulting work.
Yeah. What I did not say well was that I don't know if we would require as much effort on the Holton Street as we do for North Main, because North Main is a much larger, more complex area maybe. And so that the money left over from the master plan monies, if we can get monies from the MAPC or whichever organization we go with, if they have matching funds, we may be able to hold on to those and use the master plan money and use it for another master plan related thing. That's all I was trying to say. But having said far too much, I guess the question comes down to, how do we choose a consultant? Are we, the easiest one would be to go back to MAPC. We've seen what they're capable of with the North Main Street, or we could go out and look for others. And the floor is open. Each in.
So I want to know how consultants get to be on the MAPC list. What are the criteria? And, is there something that's beneficial to us in that they may procure, services from BIPOC or consultants or, women-owned consultants? Or, and what are the advantages of going into a private sector? I can see it being delayed through the RFP process, but do we get like, fresher voices or something, or what? I don't know what that would gain us.
Sure, I guess so. One of the answers is that it's MAPC is a quasi-state, a quasi-government agency. So they are on the state list of approved vendors for this, meaning that it's not, the list is the state approved vendor list, and so I think what you're saying, I Ching, is that, okay, MAPC is one of these on the list, but what are the others on this state approved list that we can look at? So that's something that I can certainly look into, and the things that I heard were women-owned businesses, and what else? What else should I?
BIPOC, so that's Black, Indigenous people of
Yeah, yeah.
color.
Mhm. Okay.
Question, Dia?
Yeah.
So I want to back it up a little bit to understand what the charge to the consultant would be to do the typical, not typical, but the comprehensive analysis like what was done up on North Main, which is to look at the existing land uses, and they might determine, length of commitments of ownership. I can't quite understand how we can come up with a plan for an area that's already vigorously used by others. I don't get how that works.
I mean, the plan in terms of, I mean, look, I would say look at the GBD 2 and 3. That's people live there and work there and have businesses, and we're still looking to do visioning there because specifically the development potential.
I think it's the
So
significant change of use idea. Like, are we considering a significant change of use, or are we considering a moderate?
it's yeah, I think I don't know what we're considering, nor should anyone have, I guess. I think we should try to figure that out. I think the idea is that a zoning check in this area, we do not have a lot of light industrial areas in town. This is a small area of town that is light industrial. It's the question of, are there other uses besides light industrial, meaning light industrial uses still could potentially stay, but maybe if there could be additional uses allowed. So not necessarily taking uses away. It's all about expanding that's what upzoning is expanding the choices, expanding the opportunities. So I don't know if that answers, but the
That's
idea
very
is
helpful, and it's good to know the word upzoning because I didn't know it before. That's
well,
great.
typically upzoning means density, essentially density in general, but it's really just choices and flexibility, not restricting it. So allowing more things to happen.
Right. So an example that I can think of is what is jokingly called it's not a joke. They actually call it the Cambridge Highlands, and it's the area where the Alewife River spreads out into a great marsh. It's a great thing to call highlands, but anyway, there's a very diverse collection of uses there. It's light industrial, it's apartments, there's parks, recreational, there's big open spaces with winding. So there was like a whole master plan for that area, and it's being executed. So is that sort of like the idea that we would come up with the best and highest use sort of diverse economic development plan for that area?
I mean, you're talking about, yeah, I mean, a full master plan of economic development, as I think that's one thing we do need to determine, and that's a little bit later, is kind of the actual scope for the amount of money we
Okay,
have,
that's
right?
helpful.
So like we could be talking about, certainly the biggest question that we would be talking about here is land use. Is this, that's the big, but then like the idea of doing, and that is related to certainly economic development. Are we then going to start, talking about potential design guidelines or anything like that? Like it's what do we want to do first? If the idea is to do a master plan for the entire area, I think that decision might have to wait a little bit.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of just taking the pulse of what's there now and what kind of opportunities underlie.
Well, yeah, very, like you said, very similar to the GBD 2 and 3 study. What they did at the beginning was, this is what your zoning would, like if you max out your current underlying zoning right now, like you make every lot the maximum size, this is what it's going to look like. And then they showed scenarios of, okay, well, if we allow 3.5 stories instead of 2.5 stories, this is what it looks like. So you can do that in not just the way, but not just in how it's going to look. You could do that more centered around commerce or business or
Okay.
whatever. And I don't know if it sounds like we don't have enough time and that we're trying to get somewhere, but I don't know if we're going to get somewhere in the next 5 minutes.
Well, I think the thing that is great is that you said that you would look at the list of state-approved agencies, including MAPC, and based on what what they are, who they are, I think that we could solicit. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, no, so I can certainly send the list is huge, so I'm going to
I didn't
review
know
that.
Okay.
And look for what we need and come up with a list. I can send that list out. It's, no one is going to be, you're not even, you can always reply to me for that, but I can certainly send that email out saying this is the short list of the ones I found. Is there anything else, I guess, for me related to that before we move on to our next agenda item?
Just that we would make sure we benchmark it against whatever language is in the master plan. It's like our guiding.
Well, it would certainly, I mean, I guess they would certainly have to look at our master plan, yeah. But
Yeah.
the scope of the work would be,
It can be
Yeah.
similar to the GBD 2 and 3, but it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be. I don't want to box us in there because I can start there and we can leave.
We can- yeah, so- I think it would be useful to have, say, I mean, what's a good number? I mean, one of the questions, if there are 6, 10,
Yeah, something like that.
and well, how about this? Why don't you cut it down to 20 and send that list around, and then we can winnow it down further.
Okay.
I think people would be interested in seeing what the diversity of
Great.
organizations that are on this list. So
Did we make a decision on this? So we're going to go directly to MAPC, or is that we need
Well,
to make a
no.
motion?
No. So this is not, so this MAPC is one of these businesses, one of these 20.
Right.
Oh,
so
It
I'm
will be
going to the
interesting.
state approved vendors list for for design services for, planning related, for planning and architecture firms. And there's a state approved vendors list. MAPC is one of them. So there'll be one of the 20.
I see.
And so I guess getting back to your earlier point, I Ching, was, do we want to, if we were to go to someone not on this list, we would be going through the RFP process. And so the question is, does the board want to perhaps go through the RFP process and have a larger selection? Or if there are already sufficient numbers of organizations on this state list, maybe that's a large enough. The benefit is we don't have to go through RFP. Do all of them have matching funds, Brian, or just
Definitely
some of them?
not. No. Almost all of them don't.
Okay, so
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I think we need to look at the funding piece of that to help us.
Yeah, I will lay that out, and it's basically going to be in terms of matching. Yeah, it's MAPC and maybe one or two others, but that's rare. It's very rare, and it's because they're a quasi state agency because they get a ton of state funding to do planning studies for cities and towns. So that's just how the relationship works. So they get a lot of money from the state, but they're not the state.
So maybe one way forward is to have Brian give us a long short list, and then we can look at them, and if we don't find that they represent the groups that we want to work with, then we could go and say maybe we should go with the RFP. That would. How does that sound? I mean, Sally, yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Well, I think that if there is a possibility for matching funds, and if there's 2 or 3 organizations on this list that offer that we should limit our consideration to them. Alternatively, we can say, all right, these are the other 2 or 3 or 4 organizations on this list that really target their expertise on the task at hand as we would define it. And we should definitely talk to a very short list.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we should be looking at more than 3 or 4 different organizations because we don't have time And if they're doing matching funding, it's a really big selling point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just so we're clear here, in terms of matching funds, it's probably going to be zero. No firms will do a complete matching funds,
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood earlier.
I think I used,
MAPC,
yeah.
yeah, MAPC, they have kicked in the equivalent of about 50 to 60%. So, it was, we gave 25, they gave about 10 on top of that. But I think I have the directive. I think the list is already going to be very short in terms of what we're looking at. But I will have a list to everybody soon.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure. The next, it was town meeting presentations, and we're just 3 minutes behind. And we
Wow.
have 30 minutes for town meeting presentation, or 27 minutes for town meeting presentations.
So why don't we start off with the more difficult of them, and that is, so every town meeting, the planning board presents a report to town meeting, and so this time, hopefully, I can get something to you for review much earlier, and so this is the beginning of that conversation. So, what are the things that we feel are important that have happened over the last now 5 months? To report to town meeting. So I think we can talk about, just off the top of my head, the North Main Street study, which is, we have deadlines for the North Main Street study coming up, don't we?
15th.
Right. So deadlines of this week, end of this week for the North Main Street study. Thank you for that date, Cheryl. So we're gonna, everyone please turn your remarks into Brian by the end of the week. That's one of the things that we could talk about. What are the other things that the planning board has done? Or what other things do we want to report about to town?
Got a bunch of new members.
We got a bunch of new members. Well, most of you got introduced at the town meeting because you were on. That was in April, and you were on board in end of March. I mean, one of the things that I think would be educational was to maybe point out some of the trends in zoning across the country. So, for instance, the big one is California getting rid of all single-family zoning. That's a huge, huge thing. And we know that Massachusetts has very high housing costs. I don't know what the political will in Massachusetts is to follow suit, but that's certainly something that I think would be good for town meeting to know, is that there are really big changes in zoning which are taking place, which we may have to consider. So I'd like to put in a few things about that.
So, yeah. There was a memo that I sent to you in July that was a draft outline for planning department quarterly reports. And it included status reports on current fiscal year goals, ones completed and achieved or in process, and specific properties, and then major projects and initiatives, which I listed the master plan implementation and the North Main Street master plan, and projects under discussion or in the pipeline in the center business district. Under major planning department projects and initiatives could be this whole question of the sort of proactive, well, sometimes reactive work that we would have in mind, if we do have them in mind, with regards to updates to regulations and bylaws. So there's the subdivision regs, there's the CBD regs, there's the upcoming North Main Street regs, and there's the zoning bylaw. So I can resend that to you if it's helpful. But that's kind of like, I'm kind of concerned about bringing in front of town meeting some of the most progressive, one could even call them radical trends in planning, because I would be afraid that people who are more conservative in their approach to land use and zoning might freak. Like if we said we're just going to not, it's really cool that other states are going to banning single family zoning. That would be crazy to.
I was not going to put a value judgment on that, saying it's really cool. I was just going to say there are national trends.
There are, yeah. All right. Well,
And
that's interesting.
That would be my only, I mean, there's nothing we can do about, I mean, we could ban it in town, but I think that will be a heavy lift. But yeah, no, I was just going to say, what are national trends in zoning? What are communities, how are they dealing with the same issues we're having? I mean, California, I think, has a really, really hard nut to crack in terms of housing. But
it would be really interesting to understand and articulate for people watching town meeting and attending is going to the affordable housing question. And I know the data's out there. What is the true demand at the level of the state, at the level of our planning district, and at the level of our town? People talk about wait lists on affordable housing, and those wait lists are driven, of course, by supply and demand. So it would just be interesting to understand more about that. That would be one thing I would say would be interesting to address, especially because Massachusetts is really struggling with this issue.
Well, I know that the Winchester Housing Authority has wait lists, and we can certainly get those data from them, and that would be a very local.
Is that more appropriate to come from a report from the Housing Partnership Board, or is that something that we can talk about because it's a big part of our work?
I think it's part of our purview.
Cool. I would love to know the demand and really see it in graphic form up on the giant screen for town meeting.
Okay, so
there are no giant screens in Zoom. Sorry.
You just have to sit really close to your screen.
Right here.
So any other? I mean, certainly, Cheryl.
So last week at the Capital Committee meeting, I was surprised they asked me point blank about the town meeting and the master plan implementation committee. They were very curious about what that meant and what we were proposing. And so being that the master plan is 1 year in, kind of a little 1 year plus in, and some of the North Main Street study, this larger development on Converse Street is under review. It's now been, submitted, and that we're considering the Holton Street study. It seems like maybe we could tie in the current work that we're doing, and at the same time, sort of reinforce the importance of the master plan being sort of our guiding principle, or guiding our work, and just, it would lead to the fact that we're going to be introducing that committee at town meeting as well, right? So I don't know if there was some way that we could, there's some really nice graphics in here as well. I'm thinking about someone having to put together the PowerPoint or whatever that is going to take place, but it could really support kind of storytelling rather than just kind of picking things.
So centering things around the master plan, bringing in essentially whatever we talk about as part of that narrative.
It's kind of a framework that
Yeah.
I think is already, when I think about the things that we've talked about over the last 5 months, there are aspects of the things we're working on that all lead back to that framework. So it might be a great way to just sort of create a scaffolding by which you could, talk about what's new with us and what we're working on.
Right.
I thought
Hey, Jim?
it was definitely something that everybody wanted to know what we were doing with that committee
Yeah.
Capital committee is just it's another committee, but I find the people on the committee to be very serious town advocates. So I took that pretty seriously when they asked.
I think Cheryl, it's such a great idea. I think that I think these issues that come up, I think they get contentious, they get sort of back and forth. But if we point back to this document that we've been really working carefully on the implementation committee about, it should center it. Yeah, it should sort of look back to the plan that everybody put together, right? Like we agreed on this as a town. So like this is not just the committee's or the board's decision. This is sort of a guided by this thing that we all decided.
Okay, well, so the hope is that, well, not the hope, there will be, I'll have a draft of this presentation out. Well, definitely by the 26th, because that would be our last, to be honest, I don't know the exact date the town meeting opens, but
November
it's pretty,
1st.
November 1st?
Yeah.
Holy cow. All Saints Day, as they say. Right after Halloween. Okay, well, so if you have any further ideas, send them to Brian and he will he'll assemble them and pass them on to me. These are all good ideas. I will work on that. The next thing about our presentations are, so the background materials, I apologize, I didn't get a chance to work on them until this weekend. If you have a chance to get any comments to Brian and I will be finalizing those tomorrow before, I think, close of business tomorrow as the background materials go in. Those will provide some basis for the actual presentations for the articles. So if there is information, I am a firm believer in being redundant, so that when they read the material in the background, they will be familiar with what will be presented to them at town meeting, so that there aren't any surprises. So if there's anything that you think is awry in terms of tone or material that's missing, or another way of approach of saying things, please let me know. I did not put all of the, we had talked about which diagrams should go in for the half-story one, and the diagrams showing the fraction of the floor plan, I think, if the board feels that should go into the background material, please let me know. I can still put those in there. But those will certainly go into the presentation, because I think it's important people understand the visual impact of what the 65% is. But I don't know how far, I think we can talk about this now, since the motion backgrounds are part of our presentations in a sense. I don't want to go against, what's in the agenda, but we are talking about presentations. So we have another 15 minutes on this. So if you want to say anything in particular about the background material now, go right ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Sally, please.
So I did send my comments on the oh, I just flew out of my head on the MIPC write up to Brian.
Mhm.
Because there was one reference in there to who it reports to, and I corrected it because I didn't think that you meant to say what you said. You said that the
Okay.
MIPC reports to the planning board, but then the entire rationale was that the MIPC reports to town meeting.
Yeah, then thank you for that correction.
That was just a catch. It wasn't like a change of policy.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I made that change. I made that change already. It's a good catch.
Because I know that it says in the master plan itself, where it says that we will form an implementation committee that will report to the planning board, but we had a really good conversation about why it would be better otherwise. And
Yeah.
so that's great. And I think that it's interesting to me that Cheryl brings her report back from the Capital Committee, that they're really curious about that. Because I mean, to me, it suggests the concern that we all talked about, which was, is this a real kind of big brother or top down or kind of a thing? And it's not. It's very much about encouraging and stimulating collaboration and cross silo thinking or whatever. So I think it's great that they're curious, and I am glad we're bringing it to town meeting.
Well, one of the things that I will be doing once these backgrounds are finished tomorrow is I will be sending them out to the chairs of the committees that we have volunteered to be on the selection committee, and encourage them to reach out to me, or I will reach out to them to discuss it prior to town meeting if they have questions.
What's your deadline to get written background materials to the clerk or whatever it is?
Well, they have to go through legal, right, Brian?
Yeah, it's close of business tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's the deadline for the final?
It really is.
Yeah.
So it's good you're reaching out to the people that we're nominating or naming.
Well, life on my side of the screen has been pretty crazy. So I have not been able to keep up with some of the things that I thought I would be able to. So yes, this is much later than I thought, but I still think there's time to begin some sort of a dialogue. And certainly I know that there is concerns when we use the word funding as to what that actually means. And I've had, so I've spoken with the town clerk, and I've spoken with the town council as well as the assistant town manager about their concerns. And one of the reasons that the form of the background material is essentially a question and answer forum was to address some of the questions that were coming up. And I hope that is a useful way of presenting material. In the past, I've seen background material which essentially took the motion, moved it over to background, added a few words, and said, there it is. So I thought that maybe a different way of getting at some of the concerns. So, okay. Anything else on presentations? It's hopefully we will have, so the next time we meet will be the 26th, I hope, not earlier. At that time, we will be having a full public hearing on 10 Converse. The public will have lots of time to talk, but I haven't seen the agenda yet. Brian and I will hash that out later this week to make sure that we will have enough time to go over presentations at town meetings if there are any last minute.
Yeah, there was
tweaks.
talk of us potentially adding a meeting on the 19th to have design consultants come in.
Oh yes, thank you. Yes,
but as of right now, Dennis Carlone is the only one who's available on the 19th. And I'm waiting to hear from one other who we've already talked with, but I think I sent this around, but the woman Marissa from UTL, it should have been in the updates section. Sorry, everybody. But she said she was unable to do that. So I asked if there was someone else at UTL that could possibly do that. So that's where we are at the moment. Sorry
you-
for that.
are
Anyway,
you-
but it doesn't sound like I'm going to tell Dennis that we are not meeting on the 19th. This was a scheduling thing we're talking about here. So yeah, I'm going to tell him not to meet on the 19th. But we do need to work that into the 26th as well, Diab, in terms of that conversation, unless, because we can't talk about it tonight.
We can't talk about it tonight.
We can talk about scheduling it, but
Right.
but
We
that
can
is
talk
about
about
that is about
scheduling.
it. Then it is next on the meeting. We already continued the hearing to the 26th. So that's yeah, we continued it to the 26th. So it's a question. I'm just saying that we need to, at the meeting of the 26th, we need to talk about consultants again, in addition to the public setting.
Right.
hearing.
So the only other thing we could do is if the board wants to have a conversation before then, we could have a shorter meeting on the 16th.
19th.
No, not the 19th,
19th.
to discuss this. And we don't have to make that, well, we would have to make that decision by tonight because we need to get it into the notice has to go out Thursday, correct?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we typically get it to the clerk on Wednesday. I'll also close the business for the Tuesday meeting before.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
And one day
so-
to decide.
Well, I mean, we could have a meeting. We could just schedule the meeting, and the important thing is to schedule it, put it on the calendar, and get an agenda out for it, and then we can open and close it if the board decides in the meantime that it's not something they want to talk about.
Sorry, I mean, only because we have a few minutes. We're running ahead of schedule, to be honest. But I think the issue is that I think we've already continued the conversation about 10 Converse to the 26th. So
We've continued. Well, we're just talking about scheduling something.
Right, but
though.
if we're going to be if the idea is interviewing candidates or something like that on the 19th, I think that's part of the hearing.
Okay, that's a good point. I appreciate that.
So I think the idea is that nobody else was available. Well, I should say I talked with. I didn't, out of the 4, I got in touch with 3. One of them can't do it, so that leaves 3, and only 1 can do it on the 19th. Sorry for all the numbers. So we can either. The question is, do you want to talk with Dennis on the 19th? I think that's the question. Do you want to talk with him on the 19th and talk about other things related to it? You can't really talk specifically about 10 Converse Place. You can talk about his skills as an architect. Do you want to do that, or do we want to wait until we have more clarity on how many people we're going to be doing it, and just do it on the 26th or after?
I think I think to maintain transparency, we really need to do it on the 26th. I think you made a really good point, Brian, that this really should be part of the public hearing.
Right, we can't really be interviewing anyone related to it on the 19th. I think it's a borderline. So, okay. So then we have an hour for public feedback for the 26th. It's possible maybe if we have to start earlier or something like that, rather than had an extra meeting, maybe an extra 30 minutes might make sense, and we can figure that out. But we're not meeting next week on the 19th. We will meet on the 26th. Where are we in terms of our
tonight?
schedule? So we're
still 5 minutes ahead.
Yeah, we're still 5 minutes ahead. This is great.
Can I ask a quick question about
Please.
the interview and 10 Converse being a public meeting? So I'm thinking that this consultant needs to be as up to date on 10 Converse Place as we can possibly make it. So having 3 candidates would be fantastic if that's possible. Having them attend the hearing on the 26th, or at least so that they're aware of it and they can listen in, that once we do pick someone, at least they'll have that sort of under their belt a little bit. Because I think hearing the public speak is important to all of us. And definitely for someone who's professionally going to be thinking about how to interact with the petitioner on any kind of redesign. So I think
thanks. I'm gonna take, that's a great idea. And I think what I am gonna do, and if for some reason they can't do the 26th, I will forward them the recording. If they can't make it on the 26th, but I think it makes a good sense for them to, basically you're saying invite them, but even if we're not really gonna have ready for interviews, which we don't really have the time for, to be honest, on the 26th, but I can at least invite them and send them the Zoom.
Oh, right. The recording is fine then. I was forgetting that it's all recorded. So that's perfect.
We're in the modern era.
We certainly are.
Okay. Somehow we are ahead of schedule, and I'm not gonna jinx us. So why don't, if the board is happy to conclude our discussion on town meeting presentations, next up at 8:45, we have a presentation by potential developers for the Rocky Ledge subdivision. And Brian, do you want to give a short introduction to our Winchester audience as to what the history of this is before we open the floor up to the developer to make their presentation?
Sure. I will give a quick brief about this area. This area is behind the Mahoney's Garden Center. Not surprisingly, on a rocky ledge. It's at the end of a dead end, or there is actually one house on the end of this dead end street that was planned out about 50 years ago. It was never built out. It's a challenging site. The developer Ricky Belvo is here tonight with counsel Mark Vaughn. They've come before the board previously to kind of look at palatability from the board on what would really be possible here. If a waiver for a cul-de-sac would be possible for the board, really looking at feasibility. Turns out that the connection to making this road a connecting road actually proved for the slope to be extremely high, to the point it would be, quote, probably not approved or not recommended, most likely by the engineering department, because it was going to be well over 10% grade. So the planning board then told Mr. Beliveau to kind of come back with something that is in the spirit of the subdivision rules and regs. If you're asking for a waiver, the waiver that you're asking for is based upon connecting people through a neighborhood. So now the Mr. Beliveau and Mr. Vaughn are here to present their proposed plan to kind of rectify that issue of asking for a waiver, and what they can do to offset that waiver. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mark. I have your letter here. I'll put up on the screen.
Okay, great. Good evening, Brian, and good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. For the record, attorney Mark Vaughn with the law firm of Reamer Bronstein. Pleased to be here before you tonight, representing Mr. Ricky Beliveau, who's also here. And Brian, I think that was a great, introduction in terms of where we kind of left things off before. But obviously we did have a informal discussion with the board back at your meeting on July 20th to introduce the property. And if the board recalls, we showed a series of photos at that time in some detail about some of the topographical challenges of the site, particularly at the southern end of the site, where if there were to be a through connection to Socrates Way, where that would actually, be challenging. And I think even more important than it being challenging, I think it would be impactful to the existing residents and homeowners that live along Socrates Way in terms of the impact on natural features and blasting and whatever else that would go along with that. So, but again, we showed a series of photos depicting that area in some detail and what some of those challenges are. So, since that last meeting, and I know the board hasn't had a lot of subdivisions in Winchester. They're somewhat few and far between, but so I think there may have been some degree of not being totally familiar, perhaps, with the waiver process. So, in my letter, I did try to set out some of the elements of the subdivision rules and regulations that the town of Winchester has, and specifically with respect to a waiver, that's covered in section 3.9 of your subdivision rules and regs, where it does say that the board may waive strict compliance with any of the regulations where the board determines that such waiver is in the public interest and not inconsistent with these rules and regulations or the subdivision control law. So a few points here that I thought were very helpful, and I'm going to turn it over to Ricky at the end here, but just to talk about a concept that we're really excited about to try to bring the neighborhood together. But firstly, I think it is important to note that Rocky Ledge Terrace today exists as a dead-end street, which again, that's defined in your rules and regulations as a quote minor street intersecting another street at one end and terminating at the other by either no turnaround or a permanent vehicular turnaround. So right today, it's a complete dead end. There's an existing home, one Rocky Ledge Terrace, which has its access and driveway that is located off of that. So by providing a more traditional roadway with an appropriately designed turnaround at the end, we do feel that we will be addressing safety and fire access and furthering the public interest in that regard in terms of providing safe and effective access for folks. So the other thing that I wanted to mention in paragraph bullet number 2 on the letter that I submitted to the board, I hope you all had a chance to look at it, but throughout the subdivision rules and regs that Winchester has, there are numerous instances where the objectives are stated as to preserving natural features and elements of a site wherever possible. I excerpted some provisions in the letter from section 7, which are the design standards and construction specifications. But if you notice that it says there that the design and construction of the subdivision shall minimize to the extent reasonably practicable the following. And I included a list there: minimizing volume of cut and fill, including blasting, area where vegetation would be disturbed, removal of stone walls, mature trees being removed, all of those things. So to the extent that by granting a waiver to not have to have that feature where the road is continued through to Socrates, we do feel that there's a number of these design standards and stated objectives that actually would be satisfied. And if you go back to the criteria for the grant of a waiver, which is where it's in the public interest and not inconsistent with the rules and regs, I would actually submit to you that by granting the waiver, you'd be making it more consistent by being able to preserve many of those natural features. So, and lastly, and I'm not trying to rush through this, but I know that we don't have a long time before you right now, but Ricky did spend a lot of time thinking about how could we incorporate something within this proposed subdivision that provides a more cohesive neighborhood feel, that instead of having a disconnected neighborhood, it actually connects the neighborhood. So I give him a lot of credit. He actually came up with this unique concept where we could dedicate a portion of the land within the subdivision for a publicly accessible lookout park, which is what we're calling it. Would be optimally sited to, again, if you recall the photos from a couple of months ago when we were before you, there are some dramatic skyline views of Boston from atop this hill, which probably is one of the reasons why there's been a lot of kids that travel onto this. And I know Ricky, when he was talking to one of the neighbors, he made a comment about how there's a lot of I'm not going to say illicit activity, but kids that are going into the woods and kind of sitting up there or whatnot. But So we're actually trying to turn that into a positive, and by able to, Brian, I don't know if you could maybe take a peek at those images that we sent, but something that we could really provide connectivity to the Wagon Wheel neighborhood. That would be the approximate location of it. Again, it hasn't been finally designed yet, but there's an artist rendering of what we're trying to accomplish there with having, public gathering space, amenitizing the area with benches, maybe a little playground feature, but also this unique concept where there would be a kind of a telescope feature that would allow for folks to be able to go up and use that and appreciate the view. And, we feel that that really is something that ties the neighborhood in and is a tremendous benefit, which, I think, again, going back to paragraph 3 in my letter, one of the required elements of your rules and regulations is to provide subdivision design that accomplishes public open space where possible, pedestrian amenities and linkages, and preservation and enhancement of neighborhood character that fosters a sense of place. And I think this truly does it. But Ricky, since this was actually your idea, I'd like to just have you speak to it for a moment too. I don't want to hog all the time here.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here tonight and giving us the chance to present. So when thinking about the area, when I first was brought up here to look at the site and, walking out to that edge and seeing the view and seeing how exciting it could be and how awesome it was, when we started to looking about like, what is this giving back is one thing you guys mentioned in the meeting. And it was like, well, what could really be given back on this site? And it's, well, the one thing that we're really going to be taking away is that this is going to become only available to the people who have a house right here. And this spot where I'm pointing is at the tip point of the cliff. This is where the best view is. This is where I find myself just driving up there now on a random beautiful day to walk through the woods and look at it, because the view is incredible. On a perfectly sunny day, you see all of the Boston skyline, and what a better place. There couldn't be a better place to allow for the public to enjoy that at all times. And I know, when thinking about that, it was the right fit for this location, that this would allow not only the 6 houses up here, but the rest of the community, whether they live down below or anywhere in the community, would be able to come over and actually enjoy this amazing view and this one of the highest points in Winchester. So appreciate you guys, having a look at this, and I know we're really excited about it. I think it's could be an amazing feature for the community.
So again, Mr. Chairman, I guess back to why we're here. We're obviously, before putting pen to paper and coming up with engineered subdivision plans, we wanted to present this idea, informally to you, because again, the development is by right in terms of, it's a single family neighborhood, so each of these lots would comply with all of the requisite zoning bylaw provisions and all of that. But so we, again, just wanted to get your feedback before proceeding.
Okay, thank you much. I think, why don't we have a go around of the board? Why don't we give, we have a few minutes, so if the board members, if you could keep your comments to like a minute, then we might be able to get through everyone. Does anyone want to start? Sally?
I think that it's a nice idea to put a park at the top of the hill, and I think that we talked about it in the last meeting that you were in with us. I didn't see a provision for any public parking, and it seems to me that because it's quite a uphill and relatively remote part of town, it's very unlikely that someone would say, "Let's go to Lookout Park. We just have to walk 40 minutes to get there." It just wouldn't work, especially with young children. And that if you're going to do something like that, it has to have a parking provision. And the other thing that occurred to me is would this be deeded over to the Winchester Parks Department for their maintenance, or would such an organization as a homeowners association commit to a perpetual maintenance of this park? And then also, of course, if you're going to put play equipment in there, it opens up a whole world of compliance with playground safety. So that's almost an aside to what I wanted to say about the plans. Because when I look at the plans, I was really looking at those lines that are the grading lines that is it every 10 feet, every 20 feet, I think it is, on your engineer's plan. And there's a point in the road where the plan, where the development segues from what I remember Ricky describing as the upper and the lower area of the development. And I believe there was two on the upper and four on the lower. And I could see where the division is. It's where those lines, as they cross the road, the proposed road, come incredibly close together. And I figured out how to calculate how steep that would be. And right now it's 28%. And to bring it back to the 7% that I find in the zoning bylaw, excuse me, the subdivision regs, I figured out it would take like 300 feet of road to get it to the amount of slope that would get you from the upper to the lower, because it's so steep in the middle and you have to like flatten it out. I'm not speaking in the words that a professional engineer would use, but I understand in my mind the concept. So the question comes to the feasibility of the road layout. And for the same reason that I asked for this last time, I want to ask again for something I asked last time, but this is an additional reason. What I asked for last time was with regards to the question of the destruction and unfeasibility and expense of creating a way that makes it not a cul-de-sac. I had said, could you retain the services of a civil engineer to come up with a conceptual grading plan that would show a path from top to bottom? And it might not at all follow the path of the historic roads that for some reason, maybe Brian knows, exist on the land. But I haven't seen any informed presentation of the unfeasibility of it, either because of destruction of habitat or because of expense or because of you just can't get there from here, kind of a thing. So I wanted to see that. And then while you're at it, you're
Sally, hold on one
sorry,
second.
more than 1 minute. And so I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
more than 1 minute. I'm sorry. Why don't we hold on to your thought and let's jump in and see if Cheryl or Ching have a comment they want to make.
Can I defer to Cheryl first?
Sure. Cheryl?
Okay. I appreciate the idea of the park. I have to say that all of the things that Sally was bringing up, I have also equally concern. So even though getting to that wonderful spot and making that part of the community is really commendable. I appreciate that. My concern is for the work that you have ahead in terms of trying to comply with the subdivision regulations. So this is a very complex site, and I don't have much more to say. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. I Ching, are you ready, or do you want to?
I can say things. I think that I also appreciate sort of your attempt to work with the board and come up with a new idea or an idea that's suggested here. But just for seeing it now, I feel like the two they're very jarring uses, right? I think that having a 24/7 almost tourist attraction where teenagers are there to congregate or it doesn't seem like it would last very long if it were built. But I appreciate it, but I just it's two different uses, and I don't think, and when I think about community engagement or giving back to the community, I think of something somewhat deeper than that, and considerations of some of the things that we are as a community are dealing with, right? Is again, the affordable housing or destruction of land, right? So you're asking for a waiver for that connection of the road because of not wanting to disturb the land so much, but then the development itself is a massive reconfiguration of land that just I think that the spirit of the subdivision law, I think you're right, Mr. Wong. I didn't know that much about the subdivision rules, but it seems like the spirit is of a protection of more than 6 units of housing, but more for the community. How do we? What is a give back here? And I don't see that.
Well, we think it's a pretty significant give back. I mean, look, we weren't initially considering this to be a town attraction necessarily as much as a neighborhood, amenity, because this is in the middle of a residential neighborhood, right? And that's why we're proposing a 6-lot subdivision to be more commensurate with the nature of the neighborhood that is around there, which are all single-family homes. So by having an amenity that's somewhat soft amenity in terms of, I don't respectfully think that it would be a teenage hangout. I mean, that's the last thing in terms of the design of it that we would want to encourage or allow. I think it's more of some place that you could take your kids up in a stroller and sit and enjoy the view and walk back down to your home if you wanted to take a quick stroll. And in my mind, that's exactly what the subdivision rules and regs are meant to try to address by pedestrian connectivity and achieving a sense of place. So, but thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in and then because we are unfortunately over time. So I'm trying to separate in my mind the difficulties of the site from the waiver for instance, even if we waived the cul-de-sac, there would be a significant amount of engineering work which would have to go in order to which we can't expect you to do until you make a decision to actually submit, if you do so. And at that point, you're going to be facing the provisions in the subdivision regs, which one of them you pointed out, removal of stone walls is frowned upon. And yet your pictures showed lots of stone walls which are being used to hold back embankments. I imagine those would have to be re-engineered. I don't know how much cut and fill you will have to do. Again, that's something that you would only start to pursue if you felt that you would get the cul-de-sac. So in my mind, there are still significant engineering questions about this site as to whether, even if we were to give you the cul-de-sac waiver, whether you would not run afoul of the other provisions to try to minimize the impact of the development on the natural elements. So, and part of my mind is I agree with what's been stated here before in terms of this is a very challenging site. But then I have to come back to the question of the waiver, and the real question is, does the waiver give to the town more than what the purpose of this cul-de-sac was to create a sense of community, to ensure that you don't have isolated communities. And I'm not I'm not convinced that this amenity does that. I think that if there were, the concept of a neighborhood park would be great. I don't know that this rises to that level. I don't know that it's usable just by people who are willing to walk. And this is not an easy place to walk around. So I think it's self-limiting in terms of who would use it. That's been mentioned before. This is just a site that I am not, the fact that there's an existing dead end road, it's a corner lot. So while the entrance may be on that stub road, it still shares the neighborhood with the other side of its lot. It's a corner lot. I don't see it as being isolated from the existing neighborhood. So I don't find the argument that extending this road improves the situation. And I would imagine that I am skeptical that the waiver, what you are doing, this offer is actually going to offset the purpose of the waiver, which is to create connection. So that's all I've got to say. If there's anything else the board wants to say, I think we can give a couple more minutes, but I think you've heard a somewhat skeptical board here tonight.
Yeah, I guess if I could speak quickly. So I guess my question comes down to is if we were able to resolve, say, 2 parking spots or something where we're able to create a parking, which is a concern you guys have said. I understand the slope of the road and the engineering is all something that would be my next lift, right? I understand it's a complicated site. I'm not concerned with the complications of the site. We work on a lot of complicated sites, and with the right engineering and the right team, I'm 100% sure we can make an amazing project up here with 6 beautiful homes. In regards to the connectivity to the lower community, that one neighbor on Rocky Ledge is actually the one who said to me he felt disconnected. So I actually went and talked to him, knocked on his door, that's how he feels. I can't speak for how the board would feel. He does feel that his house is sitting out on the end of a street with people going into the woods and looking out on the cliff and drinking beers and who knows what. And he's calling the police about it. So, what I was really looking for here tonight was that I understand I have to accomplish all the concerns of the subdivision, the slope of the road, the complicated site, all of that would be my next phase, right? And what I was looking for tonight is this amenity that can be used by the community, whether there's 2 parking spots or something, enough to say, go ahead and start engineering this and see if we can make this cul-de-sac work with the whole project as a whole. So that's really what my ask is tonight is if we're to come back and we're able to resolve all the complications of the site, is this amenity something that brings the whole thing together that you say, yes, if you can resolve all those things, we're excited for the project. Or is it no, even if you could sort out the slope of the road and the engineering complications, this doesn't equal out us giving you the waiver?
Well, I heard what I think the board said. I don't know how much clearer. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the board to vote on something which is only an informal presentation. I don't know what the protocol for that is. I've stated that I don't feel that the amenity is sufficient. And so if any other board member wants to make a statement.
So one thing on that note is.
Hold one second, please. You would like to have some response from the board. Let's see if the board members are willing to state how they feel about the cul-de-sac and whether how deeply attached they are to the subdivision as it stands. Regs. I'm opening it up to the board. Just very quickly, please. Go ahead, Sally.
I think that it's nice that you can identify a spot where there can be a public lookout. I think if it's truly public, it has to have more than 2 parking spaces. But more than that, I think that nothing can be done without even if it's a conceptual engineering study to explore the continuation of the road, to even discuss um, waiving the cul-de-sac rule without a substantive study of that. So maybe the word conceptual is wrong. Is to me, it's out of the question.
Okay. Any of the other board members want to say something? You don't have to. If I don't hear
Yeah.
from you,
Can I ask a question? I think just with respect to the neighborhood, would it be helpful for the board to understand the feelings of the neighborhood in terms of what they would like to see? Because again, if we're talking about, what's in the public interest and what, ties in or provides for a more connected neighborhood, I think what Ricky's hearing is that this is much preferred to, having a through connection to Socrates Way, or so is that not relevant to the conversation?
I think the board has, I mean, the option is that you couldn't put a single home there. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. It's not like you can't develop this land at all. You can put a single home and it would meet all of the requirements. So what you're saying is we want to put in 6 homes, which are, if we put them any other place in town, they would be seen as disconnected. And so I don't know that, the neighbors' perceptions of whether they would be more or less connected to this cul-de-sac. I mean, the whole point of not wanting cul-de-sacs is because we want to ensure the connectivity. So I don't know I don't know that how the opinions of the existing neighbors help us reach a different conclusion. But, again, if the board members want to speak to this very quickly.
I have 2 things to speak to really quickly. One is that I totally endorse what I Ching was saying about how this land can best serve the needs of the community, not just for recreational space and incredible views, but in terms of the model of housing that goes on this land. I realize it's zoned for single family, but if we're going to go through all the trouble of disrupting this mountaintop site to create housing, it should be for the benefit of more than just 6 people who can afford a $2.5 million house. I don't see that as there's as of right, and as of right, you would have a very hard time getting an as of right road in there. I haven't seen proof that that's true, but I just don't see it as a site that you can make work. And if you are going to do a lot of work to make it work, and we're going to waive something like the cul-de-sac rule, it's got to be for a really significant community benefit.
Any other board members want to say something? I think you've gotten what you're going to get out of us this evening. And that's best I can do for you. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
This is Cheryl, just real quick. Back to your engineering hurdles that you have in front of you. This is up on a mountain, as Sally said. And I'm just wondering if your engineering efforts could go towards figuring out some way to make a connected road as opposed to a cul-de-sac, or is a cul-de-sac the only way that this site could ever be developed? Because I think we're all looking at it, and I'm wondering how you're ever going to get your road to work with the 2-foot increments on this site plan. But then I say to myself, why can't they get a road to work where they connect it to another road instead of a cul-de-sac. So my thought would be to challenge you to make it connected and not a cul-de-sac. If you can engineer it to be a cul-de-sac, then why not engineer it to be a connected road?
Yeah, so I'll just speak on that very quickly. So when you're looking at this is the existing elevations. Obviously, we'll be changing these in regards to how the road is laid out. The plan was that we would be able to bring up the cul-de-sac, right? Up the level of the cul-de-sac, and then we'd be able to have the lower level and the upper level. If you start to look at how in this, I know you spoke on engineering. We've been multiple walkthroughs with engineers on this site. To get from the cul-de-sac and loop down to the lower road and then out to Socrates would require massive blasting. They would have to to get the road, you have to bring the cul-de-sac even further down, which then makes it even harder to get the slope of the road from the upper rocky ledge down to the cul-de-sac. So it actually it actually hurts us because we're looking to bring up the cul-de-sac, right? And then have those houses sit higher to then make that road easier to work on. Whereas then we'd have to, in this scenario, blast down the cul-de-sac to even have any way to make that road at a grade that would allow us to come down, do a U-turn down and around, and then out to Socrates. And that turn radius is also almost from our engineers, not feasible. You would not be able to come off the cul-de-sac and make that radius turn that would have to be done down to Socrates. So this isn't me just looking at this and saying that. This is 4 engineering meetings with people walking the site, and so that's how we ended up back here tonight. With it is not feasible, and then we can have engineers draft that and show it to you. That the best option would be to the cul-de-sac, and then if you look at this area, it would be connected just like all the other cul-de-sacs that are in this same community. You can see there's 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs all directly around this community. And so it would be very similar to the existing structure of the neighborhood.
So thanks for that explanation. I think we're going to have to move on.
Yeah, but I saw that I Ching had a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I Ching. I didn't see you, please.
I just wanted to say, I don't doubt that you can do what you say you're going to do. We've sent people to the moon. We can totally do this. But my question is, should we? And we are not representing just the people who are living in that cul-de-sac or at the corner or in that neighborhood. There are 20-some thousand people that are part of this community. So yeah, should we do this, for the sake of all those people?
I guess one last question. I know we have to move on, Diab. So what type of density, I know obviously you're looking for affordable housing type of 40B thing. What type of density would you be looking for up here if I was to go the other route and come back with, say, a 60 unit project up here? Is that the direction I'm hearing that the board would like to see? Would be 60, 65, 70 units in some type of configuration up here with a large affordability. Say we brought it in at a 25% affordable, and we did a mix of home ownership and rental. Is that the type of project this board would say that's what you guys get you would like to give you the waiver for? Because that's more of our core business, and we could do that. But what I've heard from the community around this area by going door to door is that's how this was originally presented when it was being sold. And I said, that's not what's the right position here for this site. The right position is for the abutters would be single families that fits in with what's going on directly around it. This isn't a great location for high density. It's not near a T. It's not near any type of transportation. So,
there are certainly arguments that could be made that it is perhaps not the best place for high density because of those reasons you stated. But if we're going to go into single family zoning, why it exists, the fact that it was born of 70+ years of racist government policies, whether or not we look at what's on the ground right now and say we have to follow this plan forever, this is a much larger conversation. So when we look at an existing neighborhood and we ask, well, shall we continue that same pattern of development regardless of the reason why it's there or the impact that it does on the rest of our community and those who can't afford to live there? That's a much larger discussion. And so asking the neighbors of any place which is nice, and they'll say, no, we don't want it to change. We want to have what we have now. But there's a whole level of societal disparities which have led to the creation of single family zoning and less dense housing and the ghettoization of where ordinary people can live. So that's a much larger question that this board obviously has. I think you've heard from this board that we do care tremendously about so if you wanted to go with a 60 unit, it would be a 40B. You wouldn't have to go through zoning. You would go through a comprehensive permit. You would have much more freedom in terms of what you could put there. I think you're going to find that that's going to be a terribly difficult site to develop, but that's open to you to pursue that. If you are, you've outlined a number of things tonight where you said, we're going to have to lower this culvert or raise this land. You're already talking about cut and fill levels, which are, the subdivision says minimize cut and fill. And so if you want to, what the neighborhood wants is an important thing, but how that relates to what the rest of the town needs is also a really big, it's on the other side of the scale. And so I don't know what more direction you can get from this board than what you've gotten.
No,
Unless,
we have all the information we need. Really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks for coming back. So why don't we move on? Now we do have, originally at 9, we were to have a planner review, but we forgot to put executive session on the agenda. And we will not do a planner review outside of executive session. So we do have a planning board review, which was supposed to follow our planner review so that we could talk about what this board could do in order to improve upon what we should have done. So I think there's a sort of a chicken and egg problem we have here, but I think we can talk about where we've been over the last several months as a board, what we thought we might have accomplished, but we haven't, and what maybe to think about what we might be able to accomplish in the next 6 months. So since I've kind of lost my framework for our discussion this evening, if someone wants to come in and start that. Brian, did you manage to find that memo that you had about the role of the duties and responsibilities?
Oh no, this is happening and I have it up. Do you not see it?
No, sorry.
This is now the 4th time that this has happened. That sometime through the meeting I've been sharing screens and then I try to share again. I'll try it again, but then it stops working altogether. Do you see anything?
Just a little bubble saying you've started screen sharing.
Right, but nothing's there.
No.
Yeah. No, so I did find it. I'm looking at the document, but that doesn't really help us.
Do you want to try sending it to me and then I could try sharing it if you've made me a co-host?
I can do that. All right, I'll send that now. Okay, so you should have that, and I'm gonna. Sorry, folks. I don't know why.
Bouncing off of. Oh, it was in planner notes.
Yeah, so you should have it. You should have it now, and you're
okay, and
the
you
host.
Can see what my version of Word does to it. Oh. it makes it look ugly, but let's go and do it.
Oh yeah, I should have PDF
That's,
that.
that's okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
Nah, yes.
Okay, so I will make, how do I make this just zoom page width? Maybe I can make it a little smaller. Okay, so this is something Brian put together at some point. I don't know where the date is on here. I'm sure it's there somewhere. Looking at what our what the responsibilities of the board are, and we can take a look at this and see whether how we've been doing. We've definitely been doing a number of ZBA reviews, so I think we're the key point on that is we're keeping up with them, and I think we're having good discussions. I think we are working on keeping our discussions to a reasonable length. I think we still have work to do on that, but I think we're going in the right direction. Tonight, we will not consider tonight's spillover. We haven't had an A&R yet. We
Yeah,
do.
we had one, which was on Rangeley Road.
Oh, yes, it was yes, I'm sorry. I meant subdivision, not A&R.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that was my fault. That was my fault. Yes, we have done A&Rs. Those are easy. Subdivisions, as we have just discovered, are a little more complicated. For the CBD, I think we have not had a lot to do yet. We have 10 Converse, which is coming up, where we have a lot to do now. Studies, well, we kind of inherited the North Main Street study. So I think we are going to move forward with the Holton Street. We have a couple of small zoning changes coming this one. And I think looking forward to spring, we are going to be looking at North Main Street changes at some level. So there's sort of, we haven't done an awful lot, there's a lot of duties that we have that we've kind of not done some of them because the opportunities haven't presented themselves. If the board wants to talk about how they feel about the last 6 months, I think that would be appropriate. Pros and cons of what you feel have not worked, where you thought we would have been. I realize that everyone's still coming up to speed because most of you, this is really trial by fire here, I think.
I think I have one thing to, oh, Cheryl, you go.
No, I was just wondering, can you go to the top of the document, Diab? Because there was a whole piece, I think, on master planning that, there we go, that we didn't look at.
Yeah, this is
go ahead,
just,
Sally.
Well, so what I was going to say is that I think that we've done a good job of addressing the responsibilities as they place themselves before us on our agendas. So that would be, and I actually have this on my wall. So it's, the review authority and subdivision and special permit. I think the challenge for the planning board is to get ahead of things. So otherwise known as being proactive. And it's really hard to do that when you're constantly chasing a reactive mode. And so I know as a relatively new planning board member, having only joined in March, that as I've gone through our zoning bylaw, our design regs for CBD, and our subdivision regs, that I have all these margin notes, like what? Or, oh, we should fix that. Or, no, it should say this, right? Those are proactive things that I personally don't know how to advance. And I don't think that the board has a lot of time to advance. And so that would be, for me, a frustration at the same time that I celebrate all that we've done to keep up with and respond to the advisory requests that come to us. So how we can be more forward-looking, strategic, and proactive, and really deliver positive change in a proactive way. I don't know how we can do that better. How to do that better, I should say.
Yeah, and because I'm sharing my screen, I unfortunately cannot see everyone. So go right ahead and speak up.
Also, there's big black boxes in front of your screen share. Did you know that?
No, I did not. Does it go away now?
Oh, very nice. Okay, there you go.
That was one of the Zoom windows. Okay. Guess I won't put up the participant list. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of unfair to ask this, with such a new board that only a few months in, how you feel that we've done. I think that's so. I want to acknowledge that without an idea of what you should have expected to accomplish, it's hard to ask you your opinion of that. I feel the Russian.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say, maybe if there are just kind of general questions that people have, just questions about anything, authority, zoning bylaws. I mean, this is a rare 25 minutes that we have to talk about things we don't know about, things that we want to learn about.
Well, I find it
please
pretty it was overwhelming to begin in April and to sort of have some pretty dramatic things happen, right? Within town, and the revote, and some of the select board sort of changes, and the town manager leaving. It was all a lot, and I'm sure it wasn't a normal onboarding. It was
No, it wasn't.
No, I'm still trying to process all of that, and where to find ground here. Like it's been a lot. So I'm being kind to myself and just sort of not taking on too much right now, because we're still in a pandemic, and there's just too much to go do. And so but I do find strings of progress. The master plan implementation committee, the mainstream stuff that I wish would that we had. Just I don't know. It seems that all seems overwhelming too, to come in midstream. But they seem like they have a little bit of momentum that we can push on. But yeah, I just think that it's still so much to understand. But I like how the board is sort of starting to work together more. And I'm sure coming in person would help that. But it's been a lot.
Yeah, and I do have to apologize on my part in that I really feel, having been on the board for 6 years, coming up on my 6th year, I remember when I first became chair a long time ago, I was like, it's all the stuff we can do. And it's now many years later, and a lot of it hasn't been done. Some of it has, some of it hasn't. And so I feel this, we have so much on our plate, and I sometimes, and I don't mean this as a criticism of this board. I feel frustrated by, I feel like we're held back, and it's a personal frustration, and I don't know how to work through that. And I apologize if that comes out.
Held back by what?
I don't know. The fact that we only have 2 meetings a month, that we can't have 6-hour-long meetings. It's the fact that this is a volunteer board with people who have busy lives, and there's just so much work that needs to be done, that we're fighting zoning bylaws which were created in a totally different mindset, that we have all of these facts on the ground created by history that we need to think our way around and understand how we apply modern zoning to a structure to meet the future needs. Right now I'm in Michigan, and there's a housing complex going up not 2 minutes away from here, which is huge, but it's like 2-story housing. And it's like, it's not, high style housing, but there's land here. You can put up, so if you need more housing, you can put it up. We don't have that in Winchester. And that's the part that's so frustrating, is that it seems like we're hemmed in by a lot of existing conditions, and moving through a lot of history.
I think that's really helpful, Diab, to have you give that sort of off-the-cuff inventory of the constraints under which we operate. And I would add, for instance, the prohibition of us talking to each other outside of meetings, which is an open meeting law provision, and I highly respect the principles of the open meeting law. And it's not clear to me how subcommittees work within that. And I know we tried to explore that. I don't think I internalized the outcome. But that whole serenity prayer about deal with the things that you can change. And I think being more, I use this word that people tell me is not a word, so I'll use it and you can tell me it's not a word. Planful, like looking ahead, like 7 or 8 planning board meetings and saying, what's the board game map to get us to this next thing? Like, I know that we're lurching into fall town meeting, and then we're going to roll and then lurch into spring town meeting. So I still don't really understand the timeline on that. And I don't understand things that have to do with how you get something on the warrant, how you draft a bylaw, how you say from a margin note, well, this is stupid. Well, my margin notes don't say that. They say, what? To a discussion of how to make it more up to date, or more humane, or more consonant with the goals of the master plan. I don't know how we do that. And I wonder if Brian, as a professional planner, and we as a planning board with access to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the professional organizations that serve the educational and professional development needs, not only of planners, but of planning board people, and meeting more often than we do. I mean, those are like examples of things that maybe would help. I honestly don't know. So that's my random thoughts.
I'm trying to read my clock here. It says 21:39. I need bigger fonts. I think that in particular, Sally, if there are parts, if you have marginal notes, we can take them out of the margin and bring them forward and talk about those. I think we just tack things onto, one of the problems is prioritizing what we're going to be doing. Somewhere at some point in this, when we started earlier, we started talking about what we were prioritizing, what we were going to be doing next over the next year. At this point, I don't know if it's fair to bring back that table of things we decided we were going to do. We have done some of those things. I think we still are looking, if we want to talk about moving forward on ADUs for next fall, then that's something that we need to work together. I know there are a lot of people in town who are interested in working with us on that. And that's something that we could bring back up to a priority after this fall town meeting. We could say, we could, maybe that's the better time to start creating a priority is after fall town meeting when we have maybe a little more time on the agenda and we think about what next big projects we want to do. The reason we are having this discussion now is in part because I think it's having a semi-annual, typically, Brian, we do a typical review of Brian every, supposed to be doing it before the end of the year, right, Brian?
Yeah, we were supposed to do it once a year around January. It used to be my hire date, but now that's changed to the calendar year. So now it's January 1st.
Yeah, and unfortunately this year we did it in March. The board was late, so the idea would be that at the same, giving everyone feedback halfway through the year seemed like maybe that's not the best time to do it. It's
Yeah,
so,
Mark, I don't know. I mean, I think certainly checks on progress. That's not really what you're talking about. You're talking about something different, I think.
yeah, I think it's just reevaluating. Even where I work, we have a there's the check in the middle of the year. How are things going? Do we have to readjust our priorities because things have changed? Dealing with a plan that was sent 6 months ago may not be the appropriate plan anymore. So
one thought I have is I really like that Brian in the planning board calendar types in a holding place for agenda items. So there's the November 26th list, and then you go to after town meeting, there's the where is it, Brian? The November 9th. No, it's not there yet. But so the whole thing of I have to get out of my calendar. Hold on, because I was getting all messed up with that. Of sort of, it's kind of like multitasking, keeping your eye on the stuff that's right in front of you and doing a due diligence deep dive on that at the same time that we're thinking about long term, like what are we going to present at spring, at least to warm the conversation up, and then deliver at fall, and then what are we going to like warm up at fall and deliver at spring, and those are for those things that require a town meeting vote. And then there's the other things that have to do with regulations, which I understand are completely for our own promulgation and not enforcement, but whatever. I'm not sure I understand how that works, but doesn't need a town meeting vote. So us taking the time, meeting more often and taking the time to go through the pipeline of projects coming, projects on hold, make sure that we can stay ahead of things and also be proactive about regulatory and bylaw changes. It's almost like a brainstorming session, like a charrette in the design world. Does that sound too vague? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, it sounds a lot like when Diab had that document up of the planning board responsibilities, and just going through a snapshot of each of those twice a year certainly makes sense. I mean, it went through all the things that you're talking about. The main things that really the board does that's outside of advising the zoning board is subdivision studies and the master plan. So having a snapshot of all those in one kind of update, I can certainly do that so that everyone's aware.
And I would add zoning changes to that list. So there's the reactive list and the proactive list.
Yeah, the zoning changes, that is, we have that document that we started at the beginning of the year, that of when we were trying to determine what we should what should we be going for over the next 4 town meetings, what that,
Right.
and I can incorporate. So that is something that we do have already.
We should look at that.
Yeah.
Like the ADU thing, Diab, I am about 60% of the way through a really cool document that is a checklist of decisions that towns around us or across Massachusetts have made to create an ADU law. Like, does the homeowner have to live there 12 months, 365, or whatever it is, right? And I'm about 60% of the way through that. If I knew that we were totally going to be talking about this on a specific, well, actually we are, we're going to talk about it on the 26th, right? So I would make haste to get that to a place where I could share it with Brian and say, oh, Sally, this is awful. Or to say, yeah, we can put this up in front of the planning board. We'll put it in the packet and talk about it, that kind of thing, you know?
I think that sort of research is really useful. I think that everyone is discovering the limitations of how much time they can put into this. And Cheryl, I have to apologize that you got stuck on capital planning. I know that's a huge lift right before town meeting.
Yeah, it's every week right now.
Oh my Lord. So you probably want us to have ended about half an hour ago so you can get some rest. So I think, yeah, so I am, there is a limit to how much each of us can do. And certainly bringing those resources together, and Sally, you mentioning you're reading this is very important because it does, at the very least, you've done the research to find out that this document exists and you could share it with us or, write a Cliff Note version for us or something like that.
I could finish it. That would be a good thing.
Well, finish it and pass it along. I mean, I don't know how to, harnessing everyone's time is just, it's always difficult. And I think it's one of the banes of volunteer boards is that that's just a limitation. So choosing wisely what we prioritize. So, I think the board really wants to look at ADUs. I know there's an awful lot of language in the zoning bylaw that can be cleaned up. It's confusing. Is that the best use of our time? As much as it nags us, is it the mosquito rather than the bee that you want to worry about? I think I love both. I actually discovered there is a real use for mosquitoes out there, but I won't go into it. I always thought mosquitoes could be dealt with, but no, they're food stock for other animals. But the point is that there are annoyances that we really want to fix, and then there are the bigger items. And so, for instance, a low-level cleanup of the zoning bylaws might be something that, yeah, we can do that. We can do a few cleanups. But as you and I Ching have discovered, Sally, once you tug on one little part of the zoning bylaw, it's, you're not sure if you're pulling on the bottom or the top. It could all fall down. And
it's a house of cards, and it's definitely a spider web of connectedness, right?
Yeah, and so we have talked in the past about getting legal to take a look at it. We had a big revision of the zoning bylaws in the sense that 10 years ago, maybe, I forget when it was.
There was a recodification.
The recodification.
I believe in 2012.
Yeah.
11. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's not unreasonable to talk about doing that every 10 years just because we have 10 fingers,
Well, the key point of the recodification was to make sure it was up to date with case laws and existing laws. It wasn't necessarily to go through and change definitions because they need to be better, they need to be clarified. Or for instance, my big bugaboo is that our definition of a garden apartment has nothing to do with gardens. It's sort of like, it's just a bizarre thing.
Would it be possible for everybody to send to Brian all their margin notes, no matter how small, from their working with the zoning bylaw or the subdivision regs or the CBD regs over the last 6 months, and say, yeah, I made this note on page 17 and I just don't understand why we said that. Like for the
I-
the design regs for the CBD, I had a really hard time reading that document. So because I don't have two children in school, which people on our board do, and because I don't have a full-time job, although I could make it a full-time job, um, I did a thing with the design regs where I just cut and pasted all the statements that say it should this and it should this and it should this, and I reorganized it into categories so I could understand, because it's redundant and disorganized the way it's written now. And if we were to thinking that we could model our North Main Street design regs on the CBD regs, it might be good for us to look at least take a glance at what I did to help myself, because then we have a reorganized design reg to base our future work on. So these are kind of what I look on the thing. It says studies. Where did I see? Yes. Well, I guess studies and projects. And it's not reactive, it's proactive.
I'd be happy to sit down with you with your margin notes, and I think that would probably be quicker than you going through and typing them up and then going from there. So I'm happy to do that.
I'll
And
make an
we can set that
appointment with
meeting
you.
up soon.
Yes.
Just, you'll have to show your paper to the camera, or you can do it in person, I
I'm
guess.
just going
But
through
yeah.
horrible jokes about marginalized and marginalization.
Yeah, we're
all of
not
that.
going
so,
there.
So that's, I'm over there. So just
No,
saying.
I'm
Yeah.
talking about on the edge of my notebook.
Yeah.
No, that Brian,
Um,
we will be in touch to schedule a meeting, and you can help me
So,
offload all
so-
my angst.
so one of the concerns I have is people have ideas and they don't feel like there's a place for them to hold them, or that you might not know where to go next with them. So you might say, I'll just sit on this idea, but if you do, we never get it on the agenda, we never get it discussed. So I want people to feel like whatever they want to see, send it off to Brian so that we can so that we can put it on our list of what we might want to do. I mean, we do have a
usually
finite
keep
amount of time.
We usually
Yeah.
do keep a master list of all potential zoning changes, and
Yeah.
we do talk
We can
about
look at
that.
that and update it. I've seen it, but it's a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't want, I don't know, maybe I want to make sure everyone feels like there is a place for their ideas, and that you don't have to, that if you give them the Brian, you'll keep it on the list. We can bring it and discuss them and prioritize them, so that they don't get lost and so that we can move forward. I mean, we do have limited time, but we do need to, I mean, there are definitely some things we need to clean up. I would love to see us, work with Concom and maybe climate action on specifications for native plants and landscaping, or rain gardens, or things like that, things that we could possibly talk about in design guidelines. So I mean, they're just wild ideas that if we don't put them on the list of things to talk about, they never get talked about. So
I think Evening was right when she said it's difficult when we don't meet in person, because there's
yeah.
this psychological synergy when we're all in the same place.
And we're all different heights than we think we are. That's what's so funny. There's actually.
Okay, so Brian Mantier introduces himself to me at town hall, and there's this huge, tall person. Brian, I had no idea you were tall.
I was wearing my high heels
And you
that day.
didn't know how short I am.
Well, I certainly hope that we can get to in-person meetings where everyone feels safe, and we figure out the hybrid meeting thing. I'm not even going to go there yet.
No.
I want to point out that it is 9:55. We still will have to schedule a midterm checkup with Brian in executive session. I'm not sure when that will fit into our agenda, but we will make it fit.
Brian, if you put the planning board meetings for November, December, and January into the calendar, you can start with our requests, typing agenda items into it, and perhaps we can do an executive session on the Tuesday. Oh, no, it can't be the 6th. Wait,
Yeah,
wait.
I'm actually kind of thinking it probably makes the most sense as we lead up to January for it to just be an annual review whenever it is. So you can do the annual review in November or
So there's
December
the
or
9th.
whatever.
There's the 9th. You can't see because I have blur on. There's the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd. I don't know how long town meeting is going to go. Do you like my blur?
Yeah,
it's like you've got a really bizarre camera. It's
so
can't.
we
Yeah.
Well, I
that's a
don't want
little.
you to see how much stuff I have in my study.
It's a little, so that's the week of Thanksgiving. So I don't know how we typically, November is kind of it's not usually just like a every 2 weeks thing. So it's just because it kind of gets messed up with the holiday.
Well,
So that just might be whoever is available on those Tuesdays there, but I don't know. Usually we
Don't
get a lot.
forget that we often do meet before town meeting, so we might have short meetings right before town meeting if subjects come up. So scheduling regular meetings as well as those ones before town meeting can really put a dent in your night life.
Yeah. Well, I think the point was that when would we schedule this thing that just didn't happen tonight? I think the idea is that we probably wouldn't do a review now and then another review in January is right.
Yeah.
So I think whenever it is, that would be the annual review, which means it doesn't have to be in November. It could be first week of December or something like that.
so
I think that
that would be December 7th.
Sure.
Cheryl, were you going to say something?
Can I ask a quick question? It's on a different topic, but before we leave, because our next meeting is going to be on 10 Converse and it's going to be the public comments.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just an opportunity for the developer and for us to hear the public react to the design? There's nothing that we discuss at that point. Is that right?
I think at this point we will be getting reports from other boards and committees.
Okay.
And so we will have those. I think what we would probably do is we're going to wrap back up to number 5 or whatever it is on the procedure, where we hear from boards and committees. And at that point, I think we're going to try to get as much public comment as possible.
Is the deadline for public comment the 21st of October?
I mean, there shouldn't ever be or we don't accept have a deadline for public comment in terms of writing. We get public comments throughout the whole permitting process always.
Okay.
It's just that if you wanted to say something in person, we are going to have we're dedicating an hour for people that want to speak.
Right. And it's to Cheryl's question, this is not the meeting where we discuss amongst ourselves.
I mean,
this is a meeting for hearing.
I think it's going to be a time issue. I think the more information the applicant can receive from the board at any point in time, like it shouldn't be like, oh, this is the meeting where we give, our opinion. I think that there should be, I think if there are questions of the developer after we have this public session next time on the 26th, I think we should if we have questions for the developer, we should pose them. We shouldn't be waiting.
Right. So again, there's another document I've been working on is my questions for the developer.
I would have them prepared for the 26th, and if you can't share them, they can be forwarded to the applicant. I think that the applicant not only needs feedback from what we've engineered here in terms of they need feedback from the public, they need feedback from the boards and committees, but having feedback from the planning board later on in the process is counterproductive.
Okay, so sooner the better.
Please.
Okay. I'll finish that and I'll finish the ADU thing.
And we need to remind ourselves that the deadline for comments on the North Main Street report are due this Friday.
Right.
And
okay.
So that's a big deal. So, but again, these are comments to just improve the report. They're not to, this is MAPC's report. And we can interpret it after I'm not being coherent. That's
No,
okay.
but I have a clarifying question for you, Dia. Maybe that will help. I thought that our charge for feedback for the North Main Street draft final report was to make any comments and edits about the preamble, the text of the thing. But then when you get to the recommendations and the zoning bylaws, that we would be very specific about what we think is on target and not on target. Like if
I
you
think
said,
that
like if you said like jungle gyms are going to be built in every front yard, we would say, well, I don't know where you got that, but I don't really think so. You know, whatever.
yeah, I mean, I think we hired them to give us their professional opinion. And so we want to make sure that whatever comments we give them, we respect the fact that they're giving, after the fact, when we get the final report and we look at the recommendations, we could say, nah, jungle gyms ain't so great. But if this is their recommendation, right? I mean, if you go out and you hire an expert to do a study for you, you want to get their complete, honest opinion, and going into their report and saying, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. They're going to say, well, tough luck. You paid me for my opinion. This is my opinion. I'm going to write
But I
it in the
thought he was
report.
asking for us
Yeah.
to give them feedback before it's published as a final document, like the master
Oh.
plan is a final document.
Yeah, I think
Brian.
I think some of it, this is more of a typical thing. So first of all, having more eyes on it. So one is it's an edit just for people. This is the board. The board is, although they are the planning board didn't write this report, they're obviously inextricably linked to this report and this study. So the MABC just wants to make sure that, well, first of all, do we make any glaring mistakes? Sometimes glaring mistakes happen. So we, I don't know, quoted somebody wrong, or somebody's name is wrong, or those, I couldn't tell you. But yeah, in terms of the merits of the recommendations, no, I don't think that's the point of the exercise.
Okay, so if they had so I know one thing that came up significantly was that there was a vote of town meeting to not annex lots 1 block in from Main Street to blocks on Main Street to make more viable development lots. And that was specifically in response to a Canal Street case situation. And the vote of town meeting was, don't do that. But when he made his one of his presentations, he built a whole presentation on that concept. And we realized that perhaps we would have been good to tell him that we voted against that in town meeting, so that if that's built into his recommendations, that would be something we would comment on.
It is built into the recommendations. The difference is that one was a by right. This is what you get if you own the land, whereas he's recommending, or MAPC's recommending, a potential special permit process. So although it's similar, it's not exactly what you're totally right, but it's not the exact same process. But I can see where the neighbors, certainly, I watched the neighbors get a little excited in the wrong way when they heard that. So
right. Because
no, but I just want to make clear that I don't think we are commenting on the merits of the recommendations.
And just to clarify what that town meeting vote was for, it was actually to a number of properties that were on the residential side streets were in the GBDs, and we removed them from the GBDs and put them in the RGs.
That's very helpful.
And that was it was triggered by the fact that one of the board members lives on Canal Street. And when he ran for the board, this is one of the things he ran on, but that's the only Canal Street connection.
What are you talking about?
we looked at, there are a number of properties that are, but I think
so not on the merits of the recommendations.
I would agree with Brian on that, because, for instance, we might say that, just as a hypothetical, we're going to take GBDs 2 and 3 and change them into 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it might be in some parts of Main Street, some of these special permits would make sense. Main Street is a varied neighborhood the depths of lots changes. There is, so there's the taking the spirit of the recommendations in terms of, Josh walked in there and he said, clean slate, what can we do? Right? That was his approach. And having that sort of a open-eyed and open-minded look at it, maybe we say, yeah, it was too clean of a slate, but having him provide us with his best recommendations, we're not asking, we're asking, it's like you go to an architect. It's like when the architect who designed my renovation, I says, didn't you notice that the fact you're violating the setback? He says, I'm an architect. I designed it the way it should be. You go, not the way it, some of the rules force me to do it. It's sort of like, I want to design the best design I can. And then, okay, then you have to deal with, so I think in a sense, we're asking Josh for doing his best effort. And then we have to tie it back to reality at some level. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe
if I have
lousy
comments about tying any of his recommendations back to reality, I will put them in my memo to Brian, and Brian can say that I am too focused on reality or whatever.
I certainly don't want to make it seem that whatever's in this report we have to do. I mean, we have to shop it. We have to shop this out. I mean, we had a very small, we did not talk to all of town. We talked to, we certainly talked to, we have to go through that whole exercise. So I wouldn't take everything that comes here as gospel.
We're going to have lots of time to discuss how we move from this report to zoning. And at that point, we will discard, enhance, manipulate. Hopefully we will take into account all of the good advice we get, but we will make it our own.
That's helpful. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. It is now 7 after 10. It is long past my bedtime. So about 5 minutes. So if
You're looking pumpkin-y.
I am feeling pumpkin-y. If there is a motion to adjourn, I would welcome that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please. Sally Dale?
Aye.
Cheryl Wolf?
Aye.
Eugene Scott?
Aye.
Deb Jarius, aye. Thank you very much to everyone out there in TV land. Thank you to our two Brians, Brian Manter, who stuck with us for some reason. I don't know why. Our town planner, Brian Zakelli, our recording secretary, Nancy Polcari, David Gauthier from WinCam.